Hello, I'm Daniel, the pastor at SVBC. And it's been a while now since we've recorded something to go on our website in this form, but I'm aware that recently, Shipson in particular, has had a very high number of COVID cases, and a good number of us don't feel able or safe, really, to come to church. So I thought it'd be great to be able to share with you something of what I was sharing with the church on Sunday morning just gone. We started our new series looking towards Christmas called Christmas Connections, trying to track the Christmas story to places in the Bible we might not necessarily immediately connect with Christmas. And our first Christmas connection is with Exodus chapter 3. And it says this: we're crashing into the story of Moses. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he'd gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Well, as we begin our Advent series, plotting the way to Christmas, Exodus chapter 3 might seem a very strange place to start. And yet, if Moses were to sit down, and maybe he has, but if he were to sit down with Mary or with the shepherds on that hillside who saw a host of angels, I think they would share a unique bond, a unique ability to relate and understand each other's stories. So let us see the Christmas connections here in four ways. Firstly, it's about salvation. God is always about salvation. God is about saving people. Always. I don't know where you're at right now, but I suspect many of us are weary of pandemic, worn down with living with unknowns and the unpredictability of COVID and how we live our lives. Maybe work or business is impacted, our families, friendship groups. Maybe there is a sinking feeling that nothing will ever be the same again. And that's kind of where we find our man Moses. He's been raised in the exceptional privilege of Pharaoh's royal household in Egypt. If you read the preceding passages that lead up to this point, you realise he had everything going for him in Egypt. He enjoyed the favour of Pharaoh, the opportunities of the elite. He would never have been a nobody in Egypt. He was bound to be a somebody. But beneath the royal robes, he knew he was something else. He must have known growing up the story of how he'd been a baby in a basket in the bulrushes on the Nile. His actual parentage must have been an open secret in Pharaoh's court. And the confusion and the divided identity within him boils over. He sees an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew slave and kills him. And now he's on the run. And he's got a job working as a shepherd. Basically, he thinks his contribution is over. That chapter of his life is well and truly closed. His past now disqualifies him from having a purposeful future. He realises that if he ever went back, any favour or position that he'd enjoyed would have been well and truly stripped away. Things will never be the same again. Well, maybe we need to know again that our God is in the business of doing new things. Maybe nothing will be the same again. But I bet that Moses would rather have had the joy of leading those slaves through the Red Sea one day to freedom than living every day of his life in the luxury of royal Egypt. God has better plans for you and me, even than our own. And he is, as Paul tells the church in Ephesus, able to do immeasurably more than we could ever ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. Moses gets to set the people free. Shepherds get to share in the birth of the King of Kings. And centuries later, God still has plans and purposes for us, whatever our past might look like. Moses must have felt reborn, rescued from obscurity and being haunted by what he'd done and what might have been. He is totally repurposed. And our God does not change. He is still in the business of rescuing and renewing and restoring. The Jesus in the manger came to save. And he's still in the business of giving us new purpose, new life, and new hope. Secondly, there is fire. And in my mind, whenever I've read this story over the years, I've always wondered about it and kind of imagined it would have been taking place in the blaze of a Middle Eastern noonday sun. I don't know why, but that's how I've always conceived it in my mind. But I've recently been reading Stephen Cottrell, and he imagines it happening at the end of the day, when the light is fading, and clouds are gathering, and the wilderness temperatures plummet, as they do in that part of the world. And that made far more sense. Again, I always imagined a small bush and a small fire, maybe because that's what we do in Sunday school, and do a small little picture of a small bush and little flames. But what's to say that it wasn't actually a tree and flames leapt up high? Something he would clearly have seen as the light faded. Something that drew him close to find out more. The Christmas story has other shepherds dazzled by light and angelic glory. Moses will not be the only startled shepherd in the Bible. And the news the angels brought spelt out change was coming. And the voice from the fire spelled out that change was coming for Moses too. The fire did not burn out. And as we approach Christmas, we too remember that Jesus is the light of the world, undimmed, still the light of eternity. Third Christmas connection. Right now, particularly in this local area, our COVID news is not great. The graphs use their darkest shade of purple to indicate Shipson's level of infections. We know it's shaken our community, and particularly the primary school with the death of Mickey, the caretaker. And it will be impacting family after family, workplaces. Our Open Doors Carol evening was cancelled on Sunday. Last week's Victorian evening, a major event in the life of our town, was cancelled. And this is on top of 20 months of pandemic disruption. And this can take a toll on our faith, on our prayer life. God can seem absent. Jesus doesn't seem to be listening. Well, Moses would have been very well aware that his Hebrew kinsmen and women had been enslaved in Egypt for centuries. Chapter 2 says they were groaning and crying out for help. Interestingly, it doesn't say to whom they were crying out to. It's a sharp contrast with this chapter when God is all over the verses. Had they stopped crying out to God himself? Tough times can really shake our faith, can't it? But chapter 3, verse 8 is God's response. I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. I am concerned about their suffering. That is God's answer when we feel that he is distant, when we feel that he is uncaring. I have seen, I have heard, I am concerned. And verse 9 goes even further. He says, I have come down to rescue them. And at this time of year, we are remembering how that wasn't a one-off but a taster, a trailer as it were, for him coming down permanently as Emmanuel, God with us. And he still sees me. He still hears you. He is still concerned for us. He still wants to set us free from all that drags us down and all that drags us away from him. My fourth Christmas connection is it's a miracle. The whole fire thing, it's really strange, isn't it? Really weird. Moses would have seen fire every day of his life. That was the only way that they could heat things. It was the only way they could cook and keep warm. So he knew fire. He knew the nature of fire. And that must have meant that he knew there was something really odd about this one. He wasn't a stupid man. He could tell something was different about this fire. He saw that the bush was on fire, but it did not burn up. The flames, the heat, they were there. It possibly crackled and spat like a fire, but the wood didn't char to ashes, and if there were leaves, they didn't wither. I sense that he looked at it for some time to notice this. It was the fact that it did not burn up that attracted him in the first place. He must have watched long enough to notice. And what he was observing, what drew him, was that this was a miracle. God doing the impossible. It strikes me as quite clever that before he asks Moses to do something humanly impossible, God chooses to demonstrate that he can do something physically impossible. And the Bible speaks of God intervening in the natural course of events again and again and again. Let us not be apologetic about miracles in the Bible. Be they the burning bush, be they the virgin birth. Our God is the God of the miraculous. It's in his nature. Take the miracles out and you are left with a false God, one that bears no resemblance to the real thing. That's why a few weeks back, when I had the opportunity to speak in the town's Remembrance Day service, I shared about the miracle of my friend being saved from possible suicide in Afghanistan when he saw a vision of someone with him as he ran on the running machine. And that story I knew was in front of a whole bunch of people that don't normally come to church. It was relayed to a big screen in the square in the centre of the town. And I felt it was right to share that because people need to know that God is not pathetic or mythical or irrelevant. David wrote in Psalm 71, "Let me proclaim your power to this new generation, your mighty miracles to all who come after me." So, let us speak of this Christmas story, not as parable or fable or fairy story. Let us unapologetically tell it and speak of it as a true story, something to be trusted. And let us not hold back from praying for miracles. And let us hold on to the hope, friends, that we will see miracles beyond all we could ask or imagine in our days and in our times. Amen.